Hello, comrades. In celebration of Victory Day, I've decided to restart doing a project I started a long time ago, in which I was going to do a series on the heroines of the Soviet Union, that being female recipients of the Hero of the Soviet Union award, most notably for gallantry in the field of battle. And given that it is Victory Day, I thought there was no better time than any. Now, I did say at the end of my last video, which I made over a year ago, that I would talk about a person who won their honours in the Crimea, which was of course going to be Lyudmila Pavlichenko. However, things got in the way and my priorities for my channel changed, but in celebration of this day, I wanted to celebrate a little-known winner of Hero of the Soviet Union. Her name is Valeriya Gnarovskaya. I discovered her story after going through the list of heroes of the Soviet Union who are women, and her story, of all the ones that I read, stuck out to me the most as the most heroic act of self-sacrifice I've ever seen. So let me tell you her story. Valeriya was born on the 18th of October 1923 to a Russian family in the village of Modolitsy in the Petrograd Governorate, later to be named Leningrad, of course. Her father was a postmaster and her mother worked as a housekeeper. In 1924, the family moved to Badovskoye Potapachkyazhny. Okay, I mispronounced that horribly, but unfortunately I'm not Russian. This was, of course, another town in the Leningrad region, where she attended primary school. After graduating from secondary school there, she joined the Komsomol, the youth branch of the Communist Party, and had intended to join a mining institute. After the start of the Second World War, however, her father was drafted into the military, and in July 1941, her mother took over management of the post office. In September of 1941, the approach of Axis troops in Operation Barbarossa put her hometown and the other districts surrounding Leningrad in the front line of the conflict. The female members of the Gnarovskaya family, Valeriya, her grandmother, mother and sister, were evacuated to Omsk in Siberia, and then to the city of Berdyuzhy, where Valeriya and her mother worked in telecommunications. A woman after my own heart, as I also work in telecommunications, so there's an extra bit of solidarity there. After sending repeated petitions to be allowed to join the ranks of the military, over 20 petitions no less, where she wanted to fight on the front lines, Valeriya and several fellow members of the Komsomol in her area finally presented themselves at a recruiting station on the 10th of April 1942, and were permitted to enroll in the 229th Infantry Division, and were sent to complete brief medical courses. In July 1942, the unit was sent to Stalingrad, where she evacuated wounded soldiers from the battlefield. Facing heavy enemy fire, she would carry the injured to safety, often having to bear a weapon for protection in close quarters. On the 26th of July, enemy forces broke through to the Soviet infantry's line of defense and crossed the Chir River. But the unit continued to fight to prevent the Axis from reaching a railway. And on the July 31st, her unit, with the 112th Infantry Division, tanks and air support, initiated a ferocious counter-offensive and forced the Germans to retreat behind the Chir River. Over 2 weeks, the unit engaged in a non-stop battle, in which she was on medical duty for almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She was very close to death after she had contracted typhoid fever, and had kept working, only for her fellow soldiers to carry her barely alive to a hospital. At this time, she was considered missing in action. However, she recovered and was sent back to battle on the 3rd Ukrainian Front. And after an intense battle between the 15th and 22nd of August, she carried 30 wounded men to safety, and she then suffered a severe concussion and then returned to battle afterwards. After the concussion, she reported in a letter to her mother that she could not hear well after the event. This was most likely a result of an artillery or a grenade. In a battle near the river of Seversky Donets, she single-handedly carried 47 wounded soldiers and officers and their weapons and equipment from the battlefield, and personally killed 28 German soldiers in action. Throughout her career, it is estimated that Valeriya saved an estimated 338 wounded men. In her last battle, which took place on the 23rd of September 1943, near the village of Ivanevka, as part of the 907th Rifle Regiment, She rescued the wounded from the front lines and took them to a hospital tent. She also engaged in fighting with the infantry around the town and killed 47 German soldiers in action. When 2 German Tiger tanks, who formed part of the attack on the village of Ivanivka, broke through the defensive lines around the town and began approaching the medical station. Seeing the tanks approaching, Gnarovskaya had 3 options. Option 1. She could attempt to evacuate the station. However, she had no time to do so. Option 2. She could assemble the walking wounded and retreat, leaving those unable to move to the Nazis, who would of course execute them. And option 3. Surrender. Which, when you consider what happened to female prisoners of war, was essentially sentencing herself to rape and most likely murder. And so Valeriya decided that she would go with option 4. She grabbed a satchel of grenades, threw herself under one of the tanks, and detonated them, killing herself and destroying one of the approaching tanks. With this attack throwing the Nazis into complete chaos, her fellow Soviet soldiers charged after her and managed to overwhelm and destroy the second Tiger tank, ultimately defeating the German counterattack and saving the medical station and the lives of everyone in it. At the cost of her life, the German attack was repulsed and the mission was completed. And after the battle, the villagers found the remains of her body and buried her. 1 year later, her remains were reburied with full military honours. For her achievements on the battlefield and her heroism, she was posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union on the 3rd of June 1944 by official decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR. In a final honour, and one that remains to this day, the village of Ivanivka where she died, the village which she gave her life to protect, was renamed Gnarovsky, and it has remained that way ever since. Valeriya's story is one I wanted to share. It's one of the most heroic acts of one of the bravest women, in my opinion, in history. And the one thing that really, really breaks my heart about it is all these heroic acts, the amount of people she saved, the village she gave her life to protect, and the enemy which she, in her own small part, gave her all to defeat. She gave everything. She was 19 years old. So this Victory Day, I ask you all to raise a drink and sing loudly and proudly, if nothing else, for the memory of Valeriya.